I'm Gab. He's Jules. Blue skies over West London. Jules, international break.
Yes.
The most wonderful time of the calendar. No. We're going to fill it because actually stuff actually happened. There were some big results out there. Germany stinking it up again. England showing that at home against bad teams, they don't look good. We're going to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
The next World Cup will be held in USA, Canada, and Mexico, in case you didn't know, summer 2026. And we're going to focus on the US because they played South Korea in a friendly and lost. It's not so much the result. We're going to try to assess kind of where they are and where Pochettino is on his journey. And maybe even ask the question, is this the right fit?
Yeah.
Because he's been getting some serious blowback from certain people. But let's start with the game. It was kind of a mixed 11. Obviously, some players still unavailable. And they gave up 2 goals in the first half, and it's lights out.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I don't think they were too bad against South Korea. I thought at times they created some decent stuff. They, like you said, I think he's still looking at the bigger picture in terms of squad and trying players. So some stayed at home, were not called up. Others were there and could show what they could do. For example, Diego Luna, who had been very good in 2025 for the USMNT national team, started again. We had XI Pulisic, who's been back now. And I don't think it was too bad. They started pressing well, and their first chance comes from a really good high press. And then, I don't know, maybe they can't do it for longer, but then the first goal they concede because there's just no pressure on the ball in the medium block, which is very strange. The second goal just before the break is even worse because it's far too easy for South Korea to move the ball. And I'm just not sure what they're doing. So I don't know if physically they can't do what Pochettino asked in that game in terms of intensity, or if he asked them to press high at times and then drop a little bit deeper in the medium block. But then if you play in the medium block, which is absolutely fine, you need to put pressure on the ball. Otherwise, against good teams, you're going to get done, which they were. The second half, again, they had chances. They could have scored. But overall, there's just for me, there's a feeling of like, I'm not really sure the players know exactly what they're supposed to do on the pitch.
I think these are all friendlies, right? So we have to take this with a grain of salt. But I think what's undeniable is that the mood has shifted. He's always going to have his critics in the U.S. And the U.S. is kind of a strange animal. But I don't know that in terms of the way he's been handling the perception. And I think the perception in the U.S. matters because you're the home nation at the World Cup. So if nobody likes you going into it, you create a big siege mentality and see how long that takes you, or you get people excited. And Pochettino, in the way he took on Pulisic around the Gold Cup, I thought that was a massive mistake. Just a stupid thing to do. I mean, if you want to show how tough you are, pick on somebody else, right? But the other thing was, most recently, and our colleague Kirk Gomez really went after him, as is others. He gives this interview with El Chiringuito in Spain. It's a long interview. It's not like it's all about the U.S. But he tries to make a joke, and they ask him, "Oh, how will the U.S. do?" And he talks about how it's not a football nation, which, okay, plainly it isn't. And it's so hard to turn into a football nation, and because people need to understand the seriousness and the intensity. I don't know. I've had U.S. players, we both know people who've worked with them and stuff. Mm-hmm. Lack of commitment has never, with a couple exceptions, it's never been generally a problem with U.S. players.
No, the athletes.
They're very serious pros, more serious than others. If you want to go and chuck out stereotypes and say this about Brazil, whatever, fine. The other stupid things that he says, he's like, well, about how well they're going to do. He says, well, I'm not the one out there. I can't be the one defending. I can't be the one scoring the goals. Which is almost like saying, then why are they paying you all this money, right? It's almost like you're saying, it's not down to me. This is going to get taken out of context. Why say these stupid things?
Yeah. I was surprised by the interview. Some of the things he said, switching mentality. He took there were big words, and I agree with you. But his communication since he arrived hasn't been great.
Which is strange because he has a specialist guy who deals with his communication, who we both know and we both like, and I don't think he's listening to him. And this is part of the issue with him.
Yeah, I don't know how much the guy we know is involved in all of those interviews and this and that. But certainly from Poch, I don't know. I think it feels like there's part of the media in the US against him anyway, regardless of what he can do or not do. So I don't know, maybe he starts building that it's us against everybody else kind of mentality already a
Right.
year on to the World Cup.
All right, Jules, let's continue with this theme of football culture. Because I think this is where Pochettino lets himself down really badly, actually. And Herc put it very, very well. Like, you're not here to change the football culture of a country.
Yeah.
You're here to go as far as you can in the World Cup. And I'm paraphrasing here, Herc. It's pretty much what he said. And that's the basic thing he has to understand. He's getting paid an enormous amount of money. They made an enormous financial commitment to him to be a plug and play guy. Right? So don't go and make this broader. Of course, the comms are important. Of course, it's important to help the sport, to get the mainstream media that could care less about this into it. And look,
Sure.
It also helps that you happen to speak Spanish as well, like really well, better than Greg Berhalter, presumably, albeit with more of an Argentine accent. And you can communicate to a large sector of the population. Fine. But you're here to get the team to play better. So using this culture argument, because guess what? Hey, look. You played against Korea, right? The culture there historically has been baseball. And then they saw we also produce a lot of really good footballers, and they've done well in World Cups, right? Japan, same point. Like, this culture argument, you can't keep wheeling this out forever. I think the U.S. has been in every single World Cup, bar one, since 1990, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
So enough with the culture, right? We have MLS telling us about how, they're the 8th biggest spending team in the world, league in the world. It's a huge country. You have the money. You have a lot of things. So just leave the culture to one side. Your players, maybe this is what he's referring to. Your players have the culture of professional football. Do they?
Well, of course they do. I think they've all been like, you would think, football mad from a very young age. So it's very much their sport. Some of them have been outside of the US from a very young age too. So would you think really like droning into football culture, as in soccer culture, since a very young age? Most of them play, well, not most of them, let's say half of them play in Europe, where you can't question the football mentality, soccer mentality again. And the others play in an MLS league, as you say, that is on the up, very, at a good level, with stadiums full. It's not like if there was just nobody in the stadiums, nothing on television. So I'm not really sure I even buy into why he would need to switch the mentality. If he wants soccer to be more popular in the US, of course. I mean, we all do. We all do. But whether soccer is more popular in the US or not between now and the World Cup, it's not really going to change much for him on the pitch anyway.
And it's not going to help you either.
It's not going to help.
I can assure you, it's a very popular sport in my country, in Italy, and we still managed to not qualify for 2 consecutive World Cups.
And sometimes it can be toxic to have too much of a strong football culture.
Well, and on the point of the toxicity, so you have a media structure in the U.S. that covers football regularly. Mm-hmm. They're not mainstream, right? It's not Pat McAfee. It's Alexi Lalas. It's the guys that we have at ESPN and so on, and their equivalents who write about it. It's a much smaller media than obviously people who cover the NFL, but it's still there.
Yeah.
And I wonder, and this comes to something else, and they've been critical when they underachieve and so on. And Tim Weah, who I like a lot because he's an educated guy, but he said something a while back and then he doubled down on it, referring to some of the comments that the pundits said. I think he was speaking specifically about Fox, but hey, maybe it's because he wasn't listening to Craig Burley. And he referring to Alexi Lalas, I think. He said, like, they're evil, right? And then they went down the whole thing. It was like, well, they're ex-footballers, blah, blah, blah. And I want to make this clear. I want to think that all these people, when they criticize, Alexi Lalas doesn't sit there and criticize, or anybody else doesn't sit there and criticize because, I want the U.S. national team to underachieve so that they don't do better than my U.S. national team did when I played on it. I am 100% certain that this is the case, not least because they've already done much better than Alexi Lalas' U.S. national team 40 years ago. But they're just calling things the way they see it, and they're being harsh critics. And doesn't mean that the criticism is correct. Many times it may be wrong. But already it's kind of created this enmity. And I wonder if it ties into what you were saying about, is this Pochettino trying to create some sort of siege mentality? Nobody believes in you, but I do, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I mean, players often, and managers especially, Like, want that kind of positivity going into a competition, a tournament, especially if it's on home soil, right? We had the same in 98 with France. Not that the US are going to win the World Cup in their own country, but we had that where it was so negative leading into the World Cup in France in 98 against Aimé Jacquet, against the players. They were not playing well. There was so much critics, and they were all saying like, but why don't you want to be a bit positive and just support us, even if we get something wrong, even if the result is not the right one. And again, I think in that South Korea game, the second half, the US just walked all over them, and they should have scored at least one, maybe even 2 goals. They had more of the position, more of the chances, big chances created, everything. So that second half was not bad, and yet it's a defeat, and everybody is really negative, and that adds to the toxicity that you were just mentioning. And I can see the players' point of view about let's be positive here. There's not many games to go, to be fair. So they play Japan on Wednesday, then Ecuador and Australia in October in the next international break, and then they haven't set up that, but they will have maybe 4 or 5 maximum more games until the first game of the opening game of the World Cup. So I can see why the players and Pochettino and stuff saying like, listen, we need people to be positive. We need support here. We're all in this together. That kind of stuff. It can work. It might not work. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, but if you need people to be positive, then don't come out and say, "Well, I'm not the one defending. I'm not. I can't be scoring the goals." Just shut up about this.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. So then everybody has to be on the same page, which is not the case right now.
I think this ties into something else. I was thinking about this last night, and you can tell me that I'm wrong. I was thinking about Pochettino, Tuchel, Nagelsmann, before him Spalletti.
Yeah.
All of these are club managers who've done very well in club football. All of them hitting road bumps with the national team because, and I can't say this enough times, I think it's a completely different job. When you're with your players daily, you can control the narrative. Yeah. You're talking to the media more frequently. You have more time to work with them. This is something Pochettino needs to get accustomed to.
Yeah. And I think your point is great on that. And I would add even Hervé Renard with the French national women's team, because the big appeal for him was not so much to take over the women's national team in France, was that there was a World Cup in Australia and the Olympics in France. And that was the biggest appeal. If the Olympics had been in South Korea, to stay with the South Korea theme here, and the World Cup maybe had been, I don't know, just in Germany, I'm not sure he would have taken that job. I really don't. And I wonder if Pochettino's big appeal here, more than anything else, was it must be very special, which it is. And I don't blame him for taking the job, mostly because the US will host the World Cup with Canada and Mexico, but it will be very special to be the head coach of the nation that hosts the most of this World Cup coming up. But is that enough of an appeal? Because if you're half in, half out, I want the job mostly because there's the World Cup there, but I'm not sure how I feel about international football, or I'm not sure how I feel about not having my players every day and how difficult this might be. And then I'm not sure this is the right call either, to have being in, taking the job and being in, be a candidate for that job. So I'm hoping he's there for all the reason, thinking he's going to do a good job. There's a decent generation here to do a good job. Then, of course, it's a World Cup on home soil, and that would be amazing. And even us are looking forward to being there when we're not even the head coach of the US men's national team. So, but I'm just not sure. And you're right, his communication sometimes feels like I'm not sure how happy it is to be in that position right now.
Yeah. It's like we said, it's a very different skill set. I remember speaking to somebody who said, "Oh, you only really start coaching when you're there, once you've qualified and you have 2 weeks uninterrupted with your players, where you play a friendly match and then the tournament starts, and that's where you start doing your work." Well, then you have to do that work in double quick time. Not everybody's cut out for it. The other thing is, the other ingredient, of course, to doing well in World Cup is the players. And I was kind of looking at this. I wrote a bunch of names down of what a best 11 might look like.
Yeah.
And from where I see it, they have some big gaping holes. And obviously, this is a situation where Pochettino can't go and sign somebody from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Although the U.S. national team arguably used to do that. But looking at this, in goal, Freeze started. There's Matt Turner. Zach Steffen's got off the boil. There's the Kochen kid at Barcelona, but who knows? This looks like a massive question mark, yeah?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think if Turner plays regularly in MLS, then he should be the number one.
Why? Because he was so good when we saw him over here?
No, but because I think he's, for me, the best of them three.
Right. But it's still a pretty low bar.
But
Especially compared to the goalkeepers the U.S. has had in the past, from Tim Howard to Casey Keller and whatnot. All right. At the back, Serginho Dest at right back. Fine. No argument. I mean, I don't think he turned into the world beater people thought he was going to be, but he's certainly respectable.
Yeah.
Right back, Chris Richards, one of those players who's really, I think, improved, made his mark at Palace, albeit often in a back three, but he seems like a smart kid.
Yeah.
The other center back position, look, Tim Ream, we were talking about him before. You said, he's going to start.
Yeah,
Tim Ream,
will be the
I presume, will be 38 years old when the World Cup happens.
Yeah.
And he's small. Very intelligent center back, but presumably you want alternatives. If you have to turn to Tim Ream, and the alternatives are Walker Zimmerman, who, sounds like a law firm. We made the joke. Mark McKenzie, Austin Trusty. Somebody needs to improve quickly.
Yeah.
In that department, and you have to hope there's no injuries. Yeah,
definitely.
Anthony Robinson at left back was really good with Fulham last year. I think started well this year as well.
Yeah.
No argument there. Midfield, Johnny Cardoso, more than respectable, I think. Although it's a test this year at Atleti because we've seen sometimes they sign big players and then he doesn't like them. I mean, he started the first few games. Team hasn't done well. It remains to be seen whether he can handle the jump, I think.
But there's a lot of talent there.
Tyler Adams, great player. I think he has to stay fit, and he's been fit. Great leader. I got no argument there. Third slot, I had Weston McKennie or Yunus Musa. Again, two guys who by no means guaranteed a starting place in their club teams.
No. But if you think that Atalanta signed Musa because they're going to play him, and if they do well, and if he does well there, I think there's a really good player there for this role, maybe even more than McKennie, I would think. And McKennie, you could see him coming off the bench really after an hour and have a big influence on games because of the way he plays. So I would like a Cardoso, Adams, and Musa if Musa plays regularly in Italy and he's back to his best. Really, I think that would be a very solid midfield three.
All right. Up front, Christian Pulisic, I think he's been incredibly reliable for Milan. Obviously, has to stay fit. And obviously, best if he doesn't get distracted with having his national team coach go and pick on him the way he did. That was just stupid. And hopefully Pochettino do. You don't need to kiss his rear end. But this is not somebody you ever need to worry about in terms of professionalism and in terms of commitment to the national team.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Especially, I think that the squad likes Pochettino. I think they've got a decent relationship there. I think he's improved a lot of things at training, in the life of the group too. But that for all the step forward that you would make, especially compared to the what happened previously, obviously, especially at the last World Cup, this kind of fight with Pulisic just dragged you back a little bit to what it was there before, which is what you didn't want really. So
I wonder if it was the basic schoolyard macho thing of kind of like, when you're surrounded by four people, you just punch the biggest guy in the face.
I mean, Pulisic was not smart there. We can blame Pochettino, but Pulisic saying, listen, I don't want in for the two friendlies, but take me after that. Or I want,
he says, I want to be part of the camp for the friendlies, but I don't want to do the Gold Cup. I need to recover.
Come on. Like, you don't pick your games either. On that, I was with Poch. Poch should not have responded and reacted.
You don't think Lionel Messi picks his games?
Pulisic is not Lionel Messi.
Relative to the U.S., he might as well be.
No.
All right. But we'll have to disagree on that one.
Yeah,
I think he knows his body. He knows he's been carrying an injury. He's been playing with painkillers all year. Could he have put it in a different way? Could he have cleared it with him? Yeah. I think he was ready to do that.
But those two friendlies were to prepare the Gold Cup. They were just not two friendlies and then you go on holidays. So why would you take a guy for two friendlies where you prepare for the next competition?
He said he was available to be part of the camp because he's an important player in the team. He didn't necessarily need to play in the two friendlies.
Don't come if you're not going to play anyway. Why would you come?
Because he's part of the team.
Because you've just said your body is not fit. Why would you come in camp instead of going on holidays if you're not going to play?
Because he's part of the team and he wants to be part of the team and he wants to send a signal that he's part of the team.
But then stay for the whole tournament like Alaba did at the Euros. Stay for the whole Gold Cup then.
Yeah, okay. I think David Alaba is coming off an injury is in a different situation than Christian Pulisic. But we both agree though he's a pretty good player.
Yeah.
Okay. Flo Balogun, if he's fit, if he recovers the form of 2 years ago after his bad injury.
Yeah.
Fine. I think that is a tick box.
Yeah.
I think after him, it gets a little bit hairy into the world of sergeants and Hodge rights and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then the third guy up front, you're hoping Gio Reyna can regain his mojo, get his skills right, get his head right. He's now at Gladbach. That is a massive question mark. Otherwise, you've got Tim Weah running and Brendan Aronson working hard.
Yeah, but I think if Tim Weah does well with Marseille, we'll play in the Champions League. If this is a good season, I think he could be good on that left-hand side, you know, or even put him and Pulisic and alternate right, left. You could have a bit of fluidity there. You can even play. We have them in a 4-3-3. You can have them in a 4-2-3-1 with a 10. That could be Pulisic, could be Luna, could be other players to just bring something a little bit different, especially against lower blocks. I think there's a few options. Is this super talented squad? No, it's not. You're right.
Is it worse than past? I always like you compare it to the talent available to past US World Cup squads. And I think in the build-up, remember we were talking to Berhalter and stuff about this, we thought, okay, this is where a lot of these guys are going to come together. This is going to be a really good squad. It doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel, right now, as we speak in September, it doesn't feel like this squad is as good as some of the previous U.S. squads we saw in World Cup. We're in agreement on that.
That's true.
And I think that's going to be one of the big challenges for him.